Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to day one of ICF India Conclave 2021 Coaching for Growth Individuals, Teams, Organizations, and Systems. A truly global conclave on coaching and growth, and a unique coming together of the entire coaching ecosystem. I'm Viji, your host for the first session for today. Rightly so, today's opening session is on nation building, economic self reliance, and entrepreneurship through coaching, the Atmanirbhar story. Coaching is built on the thinking that all humans are creative, resourceful, and whole. Coaching and a culture of coaching can therefore play a crucial role in building a self reliant and resourceful nation, economy, and society. Today, we will explore systemic possibilities that coaching can support in the context of Atmanirbhar Bharat, self reliant India, popularized by our Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi ji, in response to the economic development in the country in the wake of the pandemic. As a citizen of this country, this topic is very close to my heart, and I'm sure to yours, to the hearts of many of you sitting here in the audience today. I am delighted and privileged to present the speaker for this topic, Mr. Sridhar Vembu. Sridhar Vembu is the co-founder and CEO of Zoho Corp. Over the past 25 years, Zoho Corp has emerged as the largest software product company out of India. Sridhar lives in rural Tenkasi district and is currently focused on creating technology jobs in rural India. That was part of the bio that Sridhar shared with me. Here's a little bit more that I would like to offer. Sridhar is very well known for taking software and product development functions from urban centers into rural villages in India, and for setting up Zoho Schools that provides vocational software development education to rural students as an alternative to formal university education. Sridhar was awarded India's fourth highest civilian award, the Padma Shri, in 2021. He was also appointed to the National Security Advisory Board, NSAB, of India in 2021. In a world where most chase success, Sridhar chose to pursue excellence and purpose, and success simply followed. A person who strikes you for his humility, simplicity, and groundedness. These were the things that stood out for me in our very short conversation where I picked up the phone and very simply shared with him our vision for this conclave, and simply so why there would be none better suited to deliver this opening session. Ladies and gentlemen, fasten your seat belts now as I invite Sridhar to deliver this opening address. A few housekeeping announcements. You may place your comments in the chat box and questions for Sridhar in the Q&A box. Sridhar will address these at the end of this talk. Thank you, and over to you, Sridhar.
Thank you. Thank you, Vijay. And namaskar to everyone. I'm actually right now presenting this from a small village in rural Tamil Nadu in Tenkasi district. It's about 640 kilometers from Chennai. And I've been here for the last nearly 2 years now. And so life, of course, I moved in before the pandemic, and life has, of course, completely changed now. And the presentation I'm going to make today, that coaching, how the role plays in entrepreneurship and nation building, particularly in the context of our Atmanirbhar Bharat, the more self-reliant India. And I will share this presentation and share my screen shortly now. And is it visible, the screen?
Yes, Sridhar, it's visible.
Yeah, good. So this is a vision for to be a really good leader or a good coach, you need to have a vision. Where are we heading? Then only you can ask people to follow you. Because if I don't know where I'm heading, in how can I ask people to follow me, right? So this is a vision that I set. This is actually also sort of a blueprint for our own company. But of course, we are not going to be working on 100 technologies, maybe five of them, three of them. That's what any one company can do. But I present this, share this with a wide audience. The audience here has a crucial role here, because this is how we can get to that self-reliance, Atmanirbhar. That ultimately it is about figuring out the advanced know-how and inspiring our young people to to aspire to these things, aspire to these careers. So let me get started. And this is first, I'm going to make an assertion that might be surprising. Uh, Very basic products, very, very basic products. And I often use the nail clipper as an example. I'm going to use another example right now. Very basic products can involve sophisticated industrial know how. In other words, very basic products are only basic because they're everywhere available, they're cheap, but the making of that is not very basic actually. There is fairly sophisticated steps involved that is often not totally understood. When you see the finished product and the price, it is the miracle of mass production that got that price that low. But still, there are key steps involved. And why I keep this topic is near and dear to me is figuring out this know-how is critical to our whole Atmanirbhar Bharat, and we have to inspire our youth, our younger generation to really get into these areas. And our businessmen, our leadership, everyone has to be in this particular topic. So I'm going to take this example. There is this site, sistermall.com. You can actually visit this website in your browser. And this is a humble site that sells hair cutting shears, they call them. These are the scissors that used for haircuts. And you can see a Japanese brand there, Shigata. These are some of the best in the world, and this is an American website that sells them. And they have an FAQ section, and this is, and you can see the FAQ there. Which steel qualities are better? Those made in Japan, Korea, or Germany? And it talks about all the steel is made in one of these countries: Japan, Korea, Germany, Taiwan, China, India, or Pakistan. And the steel made in Japan is regarded as the best scissor steel in the world. Korean, Taiwanese, Chinese are good, but tend to be a little softer and don't hold an edge as well as Japanese. They're still pretty good. German steel is very hard steel, usually too hard to sharpen or raise an edge, but we'll see that. I'll show you a different example. Pakistani and Indian steels are the poorest quality and do not sharpen or hold an edge. I've highlighted that part. This website is not intending to insult India, right? This website tries to present what the facts as they see them. They don't know Pakistan and India. They just see the steel and they think the steel is no good for the application they have in mind. And this, in a nutshell, like this is a hair cutting shears, a very humble product, and yet the steel quality is very important. And this website goes on to explain what are the different categories of stainless steel used to produce hair cutting scissors. And I'll just skip to the relevant part. The highest grade of Japanese steel, Hitachi ATS 314, one of the finest and most expensive scissor steel in the world. And that is all we use, they say. So they are basically educating the customer on the quality of steel matters very much to the quality of the finished product, and they make sure to buy that highest quality of steel. And here is the thing, right? And this is another example I'm going to. This is a knife I actually purchased in Chennai. This is about a couple of years ago, I think. And this knife could actually break open that coconut. I myself did this. So this was actually a real-time test for me. And then I got interested. This knife is special. It's actually so sharp. It's able to break the coconut. It's very hard. If you try breaking a coconut, this kind of break is very hard. I won't be able to do it with any other normal thing. I'm not that skilled. But this knife allowed me to do this. And then I'll investigate that the knife and the blade has got the German edge. German technology which ensures the blade are hardened and tempered in a controlled atmosphere. So that is why this knife is able to do this. I personally verified that. I mean, I was surprised when I got the knife and I tried this. It worked, and I thought, who makes this product? And that is how I came to this. And well, here's the interesting part. India actually started making steel before Japan did. This was over 100 years ago, well over 100 years ago, and we started steel making before Japan got into that. And we also have a legacy of iron making. This is the iron pillar in Delhi, and this is 1,600 years old. And you can see that inscriptions there, and it's remarkably well preserved for 1,600-year old thing. And it has actually got a dent. It was in a war that was attempted to be destroyed, and it still bears a dent, but it's still standing in spite of a direct cannonball hit to it. So it's a remarkable achievement. So our culture was able to do these things, and yet today, website says Indian steel is not good at all. Don't We don't use that. So the key here, and this is where the coaches come in. We first need to create that aspiration to be the best in the world. This problem is not simply one of only technology or scientific know-how. It is also this burning desire to be the best in the world. If we don't have that, we cannot produce the best team in the world. Okay, we can have all the qualified talent. In fact, India produces a lot of talent. There's a lot of metallurgy departments in all the universities. But since we don't aspire to make the best steel in the world, we don't make the best steel in the world. That is our problem today. And why are we still behind? And this is the question that I keep asking. And this is relevant to uh, this audience particularly, because this is the thing we have to create among our in our industry, in our academia, in our youngsters, in our engineers. And that's ultimately a leadership challenge. And personally, the only thing I do in Zoho, really the only contribution I make, is to inspire our engineers to excel. And I'm making this presentation on, you can see the URL, if I don't know if you can see the URL, show.zoho.com. This is our own Zoho Show app. And I make sure that we are, our team keeps on this, and I stand behind them and I say, I'll fully support you. It takes 5 years, 10 years to be the best in the world, but we will be there. But you have to make that commitment to be the best in the world. And that is what is leadership ultimately. Leadership is about setting that goal, clear goal. We want to make the best steel or the best presentation software. Right now, for example, I hope that you will be using our AV tools in your next even next year, because we actually have some really good AV tools now coming up. We have done that R&D. Again, it is ultimately also an inspiration challenge. It's a coaching challenge. How do we get our teams to aspire to be the best in the world? And this is actually the real deeper issue in India pertaining to the Atmanirbhar problem. Why aren't we self-reliant? We buy most of our capital goods from abroad. Usually, if you go to a factory in India, Swiss, German, and Japanese machines are exclusively, you'll find them. Occasionally, you'll find a Taiwanese or Korean. Recently, in a cheaper production line, you might find a Chinese machine. But explicitly, the factory owner knows the German machines or the Swiss machines will be much more advanced than the Chinese machine. The Chinese are catching up, but still are not on par with the Swiss or German or Japanese in this. And what is important about these machines is not just the machines, but they embody the detailed knowledge of production process and recipe. So even if we have a textile factory, even if we have a factory for variety of, whether make an LED or whatever, the machines behind them, that know-how is not with us. And as long as the know-how is not with us, we really cannot be self-reliant in these technologies. And so our industrial houses execute these production processes, but we lack the expertise to come up with our own process, our own recipes. And crucially, we don't know how to upgrade them ourselves. So we buy a set of machines, we have a factory line, production line. 6, 7, 8 years later, those machines are aging. Also, the technology has advanced. So we have to upgrade the whole new generation of machines, again, we have to go back to our suppliers, and again, they'll have to come back and help us. If we knew how to do this, upgrade ourselves, the factory can be up to date, constantly refined. The production process is constantly refined. That it doesn't have to go through this, wait for a long period and then go on an upgrade. This is actually the reason why we seem to be perpetually behind on many critical products, because the production process, we are behind and we lack the recipe. And this is how I summarize this. This is my last slide here. We run the code, but we don't know how to write the code. That's how I'll put it. So the production process is, we run the code, we use the process, but we didn't come up with it. We don't know how to modify it. We don't know how to enhance it. And we don't know how to reinvent. And we don't know how to upgrade. Those are the things that are important. And that's how I'll come to the lesson of Zoho itself here at this point. In Zoho, we not only make this Zoho show, this presentation app that I'm using here to make this presentation, we also actually build the tooling behind it, what we call the software frameworks behind it. We actually build the data centers on which this code runs. So ultimately, we are really the deep stack company. The deep stack means that not only the app on top, not only the mobile app or the web app, but also the frameworks that power it. And at the bottom, we have the operating system. Like, we are using Linux in our data centers, but that's the only other component there. The rest of the stack is all, we built it ourselves. And this is unusual, actually. This is not how it's done. And the reason we do that is it allows us to constantly upgrade ourselves. To give you an example, recently, very many regulations came up for privacy in the last 2-3 years, for data protection, all of that. GDPR is a good example, the European data protection regulations. And country after country is passing these. South Africa passed a recent legislation to require very stringent data protection. And these, to comply, you have to actually have very deep software stack know-how. For example, you have to ensure that the data that is deleted. And that means we have to control the entire stack of software to make sure, and we give a certification that it is deleted. If, for example, Europe now requires that all European citizens' data is kept in Europe, then we have to certify that. Otherwise, we'll be fined. This again is, so we are simply tuning the frameworks to do this. And the beautiful part is all the applications that are sitting on top of the framework inherit that functionality automatically. The key here is that as the regulation, the legislative landscape changes, we are able to keep up in our software because we control the entire chain. And that is actually the critical part. And that's why it's important to know how to write the code and not just run the code. And this is the primary thing that I would, to me, Atmanirbhar Bharat really comes down to this. Whenever any industry I ask, do we know how to write the code or do we only run the code? That is the question I ask. And ultimately, the engineers get it when they do this, and the industrialists get it when I present. Then how do we set up R&D? How do we do this? That is where the next problems are. So with this, I'm going to stop my presentation, and then I'll open up for questions now, because I want to actually keep a good amount of time for that in this. So thank you, and please fire away.
Thank you, Sridhar. Feeling really inspired. And if I may say, my thoughts are provoked. And, in coaching, that's what we try to offer, the thought-provoking and creative process. And 1,000 thoughts are running in my mind. And the first one, and I'm really going to go first, and I'm hoping there'll be more coming in the chat box, because I think people are just processing it at this point of time. In the context of coaching, what would, let's say, writing the code mean?
Yeah.
If you were a coach, how would you write the code?
Yeah, that's a really good one. So this involves, for example, you're working with leadership and you're working with people in an area, it is ultimately being able to roll up our sleeves and getting down into this, going to the lab and sitting with the engineers and understanding the problems See, that is what writing the code here means, visiting the factory floor, talking to the production workers and seeing what are the problems with these machines, how can we improve them, what is the production process, why is there waste here. Those are the, it comes down to those problems, and being able to inspire people to do this. See, coaches are one level removed, where you are you are telling the people who have to do these things, but you have to show them by doing this. Let's go. So, in other words, coaching is not merely lecturing, but also demonstration of actual thing in progress. That's what I do for a living. I don't just talk to the software engineer. I say, let's bring up the code. Let's ask, where is this problem? What is this problem? Doing these things really keeps people highly motivated. The engineers highly motivated. So that is the key.
Yeah, that's wonderful. What I'm picking up from here is, as coaches, it's very important to really understand that pain point or that desire that you spoke about
Yes.
in a client we serve. And being coaches is not just about a professional relationship, right? You can be in a coaching relationship in pretty much everything you do in your life, as leaders, as parents,
Exactly.
as business people.
Yes.
That's wonderful. The other thing that I wanted to ask you, Sridhar, you spoke about desire, right? The biggest thing is to the desire to be the best,
Yes.
and as leaders, to evoke that, because that's all where it starts, right? To really sort of say, okay, the potential is infinite, and I'm barely there. Two questions here. The first one is, what holds back this desire? Isn't desire such a natural thing when we are born as children? I mean, as a child of 3 or 4 or something like that, you have the desire for pretty much every toy, everything that you want, and you think you're Superman. What happens then? Where does this desire go?
Yeah. This is a really good question, and this actually goes to. I'm going to invoke Swami Vivekananda, who's standing right here, me, and ultimately is a spiritual process to awaken that thing inside. And I'll give you a recent example. Okay, I'm in the village, and I'm looking at farming problems, agricultural problems, what we can do to boost income. So my goal is, because agricultural incomes are so low, we all care about the farm crisis, all of that. How do we boost the incomes? That's a problem I started with. It comes down to, how do we add more value in the things we produce here. And I started talking to people, the farmers, the farm workers, and then I actually got, because of my being here, a couple of people who are highly qualified, one even formerly a doctor, who showed up, and I realized that they want help. Clearly, there is a burning desire to help, but where do we get started? So I said, let's start with an experimental farm, small farm. Let's start doing this. Let's grow food. Let's see how much it sells. Let's understand the farmer pain point ourselves first. Before we go preach to them, we must understand. And in farming, it's good because it's only 3, 4 months it takes from the initial planting to the output for most things. So within 3, 4 months what the economics is, what the problems are, all of that. And for example, we ran into a fungus problem, where one of the things we planted, the entire field was full of fungus, and we didn't know what it was. We didn't even know it was fungus. It had some weird, it's not right. Something is not right there, and then you go and find out it's a fungus. We learned, right? And this is the kind of thing the real world throws at you. So now the person who was in charge, he developed a deep actual understanding of these now, and felt that now I am super motivated. I have to make this work. I didn't know when I came here what I was signing up for, but now I have a really, really deep hunger for this. So by this learning by doing creates that, and that is what, and that's how Zoho has been created. People who, for example, building the presentation software, didn't know when they came in they were going to build presentation software, but now that they have this problem, we have to be the best in the world. How do we do this? And that is how we create this mindset, create a desire.
Hearing you say that, Sridhar, one of the things that just flashes in my mind is, how do we put, for example, coaching or Indian coaches or, coaching as a way of life in India out there, and truly have a made in India model, so to say. In fact, one of our things vision for this conclave, and I know a lot of people out there who've worked day and night to make it happen, was a simple thing saying, this is a made in India conclave, but we are going to be out there at global standards, making everything possible. So it was literally that burning desire that has pushed up and pushed us to attempt some really daring things, I would say, right? Putting this whole thing on technology, taking a chance. Yesterday, in the middle of a presentation, the video just stopped, right? It was no one's mistake. Multiple testing. Now we could have said no. Let's play it safe and just do a physical conference for about 100 people. But I think that desire was to say no. We want to reach more. We want to get the best speakers. We want to share this message. So totally connect with that. Shifting gears a little bit, Sridhar, one personal question, which is about what is that desire to be the best with Sridhar as a person? What keeps you going?
Well, I want to solve problems. I have a even the company was born to. I was thinking about why are we poor? Why is there so much poverty in our nation? And I'm not a natural born businessman. I wasn't thinking of myself as a businessman. I hardly ever do anything about business. But I realized that ultimately creating jobs requires being in business, and and technology is my natural forte. I was trained as an engineer, so I decided to be in the technology business, and I taught myself business because of this need to create jobs. That is how I came to this whole thing, and so it is a inner fire. It's a spiritual thing. And you actually talked about what can Indian coaches do. We must tap into our own heritage, our spiritual heritage. There is a lot more wisdom in Swami Vivekananda in this than all of the management textbooks in the world. If we tap that wisdom, then actually can be the light to the world. This Swami Vivekananda said this. India is the light to the world. So this is how I would do this. So tap our own. Part of the reason I came back and I'm in a rural India is tap into the deep sources of our heritage and also nourish those roots. So we are, and I always say, be rooted in our civilization, and then spread that. And this, because see, what is the core of Bharat? Our vision of this is really contentment and humility. Those are the two key virtues of our nation, and we teach the world contentment. Like I see this in these villages. People have contentment, and that there is enough mindset, right? This is enough, and that's critical. Actually, you might think, how can that enough mindset produce excellence? Excellence then becomes actually a thing that is not to satisfy our personal ego. That is to solve a problem well. Yeah, and the way I'll do this is Srinivasa Ramanujan was solving mathematical problems not to gain awards, but because he was really, really, really interested in the problem. He was interested in figuring that mathematical problem. So that is the contentment. And humility, that's a key virtue of our nation also, that with all of the spiritual achievement, the key is to be humble. And this is what the world desperately needs today, because the world needs these, because today, things like global warming, the current path the world is on, particularly the Western world is on, cannot produce any good outcome with all these problems. So we have to bring our heritage, the contentment, humility, and we have to live humbler lives. And if we can get those, and then we can actually exercise leadership. So ultimately, this is about leadership as being a servant leadership, to serve, leadership as serve. And I think that is what really Indian coaches can bring into this.
There's like so many things: servant leadership, humility, contentment, and desire to be the best. Seems very paradoxical, but we say coaching in itself has so many paradoxes.
Correct.
So this is very powerful, Shida, and I can see like the chat, the Q&A box is brimming. So if I don't get to that, I will be doing great disservice as my role as a host. So I'm going to take a few of them, Sridhar, and you're free to look at it as well. So I think there is one question that I'm seeing. when the client's goal, this is from Aparna Ponappa, when the client's goal is just to get by, quickest way to make money, easiest way to acquire customers, how can we aspire a shift to depth, expertise, being world class? How do you evoke that sense?
Yeah, that's a really good one. Even those people, something somewhere, take a person who's only out to make money. Then you ask, why do you want to make money? And then they will ultimately they'll come to, maybe I want to own a fancy car, or I want to live in an expensive neighborhood, or something that is there, right? There is, well, what is a fancy car? Why do you want to buy this? Well, that's the best car in the world, right? Well, so we want to make money so that we can have the best thing in the world in something, ultimately. And if somebody didn't aspire to produce the best thing in the world, well, we don't get to consume it. So we are looking at it as consumers today. But the whole idea of people is to also be producers. In fact, the whole thing that I try to bring to this is, it's okay to want to be consumers, but we also have to be producers. It's okay to want the best in the world for us, but are we giving the best in the world? No. And similarly, take a normal problem. A lot of business people will say, well, I don't get much loyalty from my staff. I immediately ask, instead of asking it that way, let me ask this way. What have we done to earn the loyalty for our people? What have we done to our people to earn their loyalty? This is how you kind of, that suddenly a light bulb will go on the brain. Okay, that's a different way to think about it. That's a really good way to think about it, because then I realize people will only be loyal if I have done something to earn the loyalty. Have we done enough to earn the loyalty? So that is how you have to awaken the spirit with it. And I believe it's possible.
Yeah. So there's another question that's come from Bharat Kalyan Ram. We seem to focus as a culture on thinking and discussing. How do we change this to a more execution based economy?
That's a really good one. This is actually why I prohibit too much abstract thought alone. Enough philosophy we have to do. This is actually, again, this is not my formulation. Swami Vivekananda said this himself, that all of the thinking, we have to also be the doing, and we have to get into the thick of things. That's why I said, be in the factory floor, be in the R&D lab, and look at the code. All of this is important. And part of the reason I came to this village here, and rather than sit in a city, is I want to be directly involved in looking at some of these problems. For example, education for these rural children, farm problems. I want to firsthand experience it and see even a small bit of difference I can make here to the lives of these people here. That if there is, I won't preach contentment to these farmers because they have so little already to begin with. I'll preach them, you need to make more money. And just like, Swami Vivekananda actually said this. Somebody praised him, I came to India, your country is so, people are so contented. He said, I want to awaken the spirit so that people are not so contented. We have to go from this temperament to the Rajasic temperament so that finally we reach a Sattvic temperament. We are right now in a kind of a sleeping mode as a country. We have to wake up and desire more, and then we can go into the Sattvic temperament. So my advice is twofold. To the richest, I'll say contentment, reduce your consumption. To the poorest, I say aspire and consume more. So I'm in both sides.
Yeah, no. So this is what we were talking about yesterday. That some of the greatest problems need a systemic approach to solve this, right? And you've got to kind of look at the system as a whole. So that's very inspiring, Sridhar, and very practical too, if I may say. There's a question that's coming up again on the future of India from Bhaskar Natarajan. The future of India is in the hands of youth. What advice do you have for coaches to support these leaders of tomorrow?
Yeah. So again, we have to tap into our heritage. We have to be true to our heritage. In other words, we have to look at growth and development through our own lens. What does it mean? And I myself have this vision of an India where this is again very much aligned with what Gandhiji thought, and very much what our President Abdul Kalam ji has talked about. That reviving our rural areas, Abdul Kalam ji had presented this vision of Pura, urban amenities in rural areas. That's important because our culture, our all of these attributes. I'll put it this way: very large cities kind of become ego trigger centers. My neighbor has it, I want this, and that person drives a flashy car, I want that. They are dressed in a very fancy way, and I want that kind of thing, right? So, and the more urban areas have this vast number of incidents we come across in daily life that are these ego triggers, trigger our ego into, I want this, I want that. A rural life actually gets rid of a lot of that stimulus of ego. So that is why it's actually possible to be more contented in this. And to be truthful to our own soul as a nation, we have to revive our road values. They are troubled right now because of economic issues, but we have to revive them. And that is what I would say as a sort of a personal mission of leadership where it has here. And I can only, these things have to be your personal missions. What do you really want to achieve in the limited time we have on this planet? That's the question we have to each ask ourselves.
Indeed. Uh, on this topic of self-reliance and really cultivating that, there's a question, very nice question from Bhavani Joyce. The value of self-reliance needs to be inculcated from the time children are able to think and rationalize. How do we establish this value at mass in children via the academic system to enable a fully self-reliant India in the near future?
I'd say this is actually something we are trying in our school. Convert this from exam based to very project based. Make the children do small projects, then larger projects, based on age and relevance, rather than simply prepare for endless series of exams. This requires a rethink for how we do our education. That's what, again, our school is actually, for example, it's not based on CBSE or any curriculum. It's based on NIOS, National Institute of Open Schooling. And the reason we adopted that is, I don't want the kids to be pressured based on their age. You have to prepare for this 10th standard or this exam or that exam. But we do series of projects, assignments, including, for example, because this being a village, these kids are taught farming, some of the machinery around it, all of that too. Because so that you use your surroundings themselves as a way to learn, and that is important. And then they get the end of that. They actually have to have I am confident to face the future. That is what the education has to endow them with, not the insecurity of will I get this job. So this is the job creation mindset rather than the job seeking mindset. That's what you have to create.
uh, that's quite wonderful. In fact, I just saw a very nice question, and I think that pretty much answer what you answered just pretty much takes care of that as well. I think this is from Shobha Simon. How do we build writing the code as a way of being and becoming within homes and schools and at organizations? I think you just spoke about the school bit of it, but I'm sure, as parents, and I'm sure there are many parents sitting here. This is a very powerful one that I'm also taking away today. How do I, with my teenagers, build this mindset of writing the code? And sometimes as parents, we get very tempted to just say, you know, deal with the code, right? We something stops us, and we don't always say write the code. But so I think Shobha, that would have also answered what you have asked.
Small project. That's what I'd say. Small project.
Mm.
For example, in our school now, we have an instructor from a polytechnic who joined us. Our goal is to take apart these like a very old fan. We take it apart, put it back, see if it works. These kinds of things, hack things. Take things apart, put them back, and see why they break. That's the type of mindset I want to inculcate in the school.
No, and that's easier said than done, honestly, right? Because that also means to the person who's encouraging this, you're taking risk.
Yes.
And I think there's a wonderful question. I think if I'm not mistaken, from Ashok Iyer, I hope I can find that, which is about how do we create a culture of accepting failure as a necessity for success? Do
Yeah.
you have any shares from Zoho? Great question, Ashok.
Yeah. So this is actually one of the things in any R&D project. Without the possibility of failure, there's no R&D. It's not R&D. Okay. And R&D is not like trains running on time. It's like laying a new track through an unknown terrain. through a swamp or jungle and forest and the mountain. That's what really an R&D project is like. It's not like running a train on time on a already laid track. It's laying new tracks, entirely new tracks. This actually also, this is to be very clear. For example, I always pose this kind of a thought experiment question: what does it take to build a new plane, as Boeing 747, out of a rural district in India? It's actually still an R&D project, even if the plane has been built before by another culture, another country. That context is not available here to the people who are attempting to build here. They don't. It's sort of like saying somebody knows how to run 100 meters under 10 seconds, therefore I can run. I still have to do the hard work of training and practice all of that, right? In the same way, building a 747 is still an R&D project, even if somebody has already done it, because we don't have access to the know-how. We don't have access to what is in their brains. We have to still figure that out. So that is why it's very important to do these small projects all the time and get into the mindset of seeing things fail before they sometimes succeed. Then you get, and this is how in Zoho we have numerous times we have to go back to the drawing board and restart a project. We have done that. So it's become very common for us. So the failure is very much part of our DNA of success.
Yeah, I mean, this connects with, as I was starting off my journey as a coach, training to be one, we would measure, there'd be a lot of confusion about what success itself was, right? And this fear of failure, saying, will I be able to make a difference? Will I actually be able to do it? Because what you learn in the textbook, what you learn in class is very different from actually working with a human being.
Yes.
And you need to go through that inner journey yourself. Sridhar, there are a lot of questions also about, your role in moving to the village. And I think there's one by Dr. Aravindan Raghavan who's asking you, how are you coaching the village community to transform?
Yeah, so slowly, nothing is overnight. I've been here for almost 2 years now, and we are investing in the school, investing in better farming techniques, all of that. And one of the very simple examples, I wanted some of the rural workers to, for example, influence them to drink less or quit drinking altogether, because drinking is a major problem in villages, and when anybody will tell you that here. So we didn't go immediately preach saying stop drinking. We also, for example, started yoga classes, and the people who come for yoga classes, they actually report later that we drink less or we stop drinking because of that. So automatically, something's happen in your body and mind, all that. The need for alcohol goes down. So these are the kinds of things that I've been working on. First important thing is we are investing. People know that we are investing in people. I've told people that the school is here. The school is free. All the children have 2 full meals a day. Then that earns the trust of the parents. Then I asked the parents, I'm going to ask you only a couple of simple things from you. Maybe come for the yoga class, maybe, the men particularly. We say parents, it's only the men drink here, right? So I have to be very clear here. Tell the men, please consider not drinking, right? That is your investment in your children. So that's how I try to make the change here.
Yeah, so almost like you start with the most existential needs,
Exactly.
right, and then build the way upwards. That again is something that I'm sure coaches and coaching can think about. What's your most existential need in your client, and build it up from there. Again, I think there's some question on innovation, and I'm going to pick this up from Shine Ravindra. Thank you very much, Sridhar. Considering your position as an Indian IT industry, what's your opinion about creating a common platform for IT firms and universities, and even skilled individuals to collaborate that might help? You want to take that, Sridhar?
What is the question again?
My sense is it's something about creating a common platform for IT firms and universities.
Yeah.
And do you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, there's already, if you are in the know, for example, there's Hacker News, which is actually a lot of where the programmers hang out. Twitter, now Indian AppKu, all of these are already there.
Hmm.
I don't know that yet another platform, but these there are now special purpose social networking tools that are coming up where you apply the same social networking principle but in custom domains. That might be something that's worth looking at. We are actually building Aratai like that, our own chat
Yeah.
app or instant messaging into that. But it's still very much work in progress. We're still working in R&D on it.
There's another question on reverse mentoring by Vinitha. This is again interesting. What are the positives in the rural community we can access to build a corporate urban culture? I think you did touch upon it, right? About the bit on contentment. Oh my God.
Yeah.
This is the problem with this chat box. By the time I read a question, there are 10 more questions coming up. So just give me one moment. Let me pick that up. Okay. So she says, like a reverse mentoring, we always think we need to transform rural, but I feel now the transformation needs to be in urban. So beyond contentment, what are some of these principles we can take to, let's say, transforming our corporations or our um, more all parts of the country?
Yeah. So I actually describe the culture of Zoho itself as little villages. And what I mean by that is very close knit teams. People, one thing you'll find in a village, I'll give you this example. There was about 4 or 5 months ago, there was a death, an old person died. And the entire family came together. There's about 50 people came together to mourn and all to celebrate their life, recall all of that. But I could see that I was there actually. I was there in that home, and I was surprised how much sort of the close knit the families are here. This is actually important for corporations because you are a team has to bond together in order to produce excellence, and that's something that very much we can actually learn from the village culture. That's why actually I literally used to say Zoho is a collection of these villages, each with a very strong bonding with the team, within the team.
Yeah, in fact, you'd be interested, Sridhar. We have some sessions very specifically on team coaching and systemic coaching in the next 2 days, which
Okay.
are actually a big thing now in coaching, saying that it's not just coaching the individual, right? It's coaching the system
Yes.
or, coaching the team, coaching the organization for real sustainable change to happen. I understand we are nearing the close of our time, but if you're okay, Sridhar, could you go on for about another 5, 7 minutes?
Yeah, sure. I can do that.
Okay, wonderful. Because I'm having a tough time selecting these questions, but I'm still going to try, and I hope I'm doing okay. Um, so yeah, one moment, please. Okay, just one moment. Yeah, so this is by Krishnan. In fact, Krishnan was one from the organizing team who helped us co-create this topic. So we have a country leadership that is focused on self-reliance. How long do you think it will be the time we are self-reliant, and what pitfalls should we look for?
I kind of addressed this in my presentation. I said 10 years. We have to have a 10-year. We cannot just do this in 1 or 2 years. We have to have a 10-year, maybe even a 20-year cycle, a generation of that change. It's possible to do it. I mean, we have numerous examples. We see Japan and South Korea and Taiwan. Lately, China has, taken the same steps. So if you look at China between 2000 and 2021, the 21 years, they have actually, you can see the transformation there in these things. In a similar way, it'll be 10 years for us to see visible results. Yeah, we are in the right direction. And 20 years when we are truly on par with the global majors in this. But we can do it. We must aspire to this. And to put this in perspective, Zoho itself now just celebrated 25 years.
Yeah.
And only now we are at that stage where we can actually say that we have a very strong technology portfolio.
So 25 years, that's
Right.
a long journey.
Yeah.
There's a very direct question from PM Chandrasekhar here. Successful Indian entrepreneurs are often supremely confident that they are doing things right. Elsewhere in the world, business leaders are more open to coaching. How to make Indian leaders accept that they may need external help?
Yeah. This is a- It's a tough one.
Very tough one. So I was wondering whether to field it or not, but I said, let's just
No,
get it
no,
out
no, it's
there.
okay. Yeah. So, no, ultimately it has to come from within. There has to be a feeling of humility. I have something to learn, and that has to be there. See, there is one drawback of our traditional culture is the very deep hierarchies, right? In other words, the problem comes in India where if you are in a leadership position, you yourself have to pretend to know it all. People expect you to do that too, right? And if leadership is able to say, I don't know, teach me, I don't know this, right? That's the beginning of wisdom, actually. So if we just are able to say, I don't know, to stop it, then that's actually better. Unfortunately, when we put people on a pedestal and they're supposed to know it all, and that's the problem. And then they have to pretend to that, at least keep your mouth shut if I don't know, rather than say I don't know, so that other people can assume that I know something. So that is actually part of the problem. So we have to teach people to say I don't know a lot.
Yeah, in coaching, one of the competencies that we taught is a coaching mindset, embodying a coaching mindset, which is simply about also saying, I'm vulnerable. I really don't know.
Right.
And clients come to us hoping for advice and, a lot of gyan on subject matters that they know much better than coaches. And still, what is the role we can play? I think good place is to say, I don't know, and be quite honest about it. So I think there was one very nice question. I've missed it, but let me give you the essence of it. Saying that you seem to be, and I think the audience also feels that way. That you're so humble and you're so grounded in what you're saying. How do we as coaches embody that?
Well,
Because a lot of us come here, Sridhar, with second careers. We've had very successful first careers, and then something inspires us to become coaches, right? And when I say us, it doesn't mean that only coaches, right? This can apply to anyone who's traversed a certain path. How do you, as you keep traversing that path, hold on to being humble?
well, it's because it, it's not what you see is not humility, it is reality. Meaning, when we do a new project, I'm going to fail just as the same as anybody else. Brand new R&D effort. I know this, right? Like when we launch a new R&D effort in Zoho, just because I launched it does not mean that it's going to succeed. So it's not humility, it is necessity. It is reality itself. So one way to stay grounded that way is when you start new projects, put yourself in those, as they say, get out of your comfort zone. Oftentimes, in fact, our ego prevents us because we don't want even us to feel that visible failure. But if you get out of that mode, I can fail and I'm allowed to fail, I have the room to fail, then it's not really humility, it's then that reality itself that just reflects through you. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. So it's not just about acknowledging publicly, but even to your own reflection in the mirror.
Exactly.
Hey, I goofed up,
Yes, exactly.
right? And
Well, I
to
don't know. I mean, take the fungus problem we got in the farm here when we tried this new crop. Well, I don't know why that problem came. Let's investigate. That's all I can say. It's not like I know everything and I know why this happens, right?
yeah.
I don't know. So that is the saying I don't know is a critical thing here.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, one last one for the road, which is, and this one also something I wanted to really ask you the first time we spoke. CN Murthy has this question. How did you shift yourself into developing the root of what helped you drive your dream? What factors helped?
Yeah. So if I understand the question, I mean, how do you go back to your roots? Is that the question here?
That and I think a little bit of your personal narrative as well. I mean, what sort of factors have helped you?
Yeah. I've tried, like, if you look at my background, how I grew up from childhood, I had a connection to a village in Tanjavur district. That's where I
Hmm.
parents came from. And I grew up in Chennai, but always going back to the village. So I never, in a key sense, forgot the roots where I am from. And also our nation, our culture shaped me growing up, right? And that's what I'm back to that now. I spent a lot of time abroad building this business, all of that, but I'm back now, and that is that, and so it's smoothly, I'm very much at home here. I've never actually felt like I ever left at all, and that is that I believe that's important. We all have to be grounded and rooted somewhere. One of the problems of modernity is the rootlessness. Very rootlessness is something that you can see it in younger people a lot. Completely feeling rootless, the floating, amorphous thing. I don't belong anywhere. Feeling. So you have to have a place and time where you belong to, and strongly rooted there, and then build around it. That is how I will. That's my own personal way of doing it.
Yeah, indeed. Find your tribe, find your purpose,
Exactly.
find your roots.
Right.
Beautiful. Unfortunately, I think we need to wind this down.
Well,
My
actually, I'm going to make a book recommendation on these
Okay,
topics. There is a book called How Asia Works,
right.
and by Joe Studwell. I'd highly recommend this reading for all of us because this is a story of how East Asian countries developed. So I strongly recommend that book, How Asia Works.
Okay, wonderful. So I'd request, Kavita to put that in the chat box. Ladies and gentlemen, please do read it. I think we've, heard this conversation. It's just buzzing, but unfortunately, we need to bring this to a close today. Sridhar, any final remark before we close?
Abhi, I'll wish everyone the best. You are doing a really vital work of preparing the leadership and coaching. So, and I wish you all the best. Thank you, and namaskaram again.
Namaskaram, Sridhar. And honestly, I can just say, feel so proud to be associated with you, to know you, to have you here. And I think I'm very privileged that I could just have this conversation. Please wish us well and bless us for this conclave to be a success, because this conclave is just not a conference and an intellectual coming together. This is to inspire people to go out there and be change makers and actually make the difference to society. I know there are coaches here, very seasoned coaches. I know there are aspiring coaches. I know there are leaders, and everyone who wants to just grow sitting here in this audience. And I hope each of you has taken your inspiration from this talk. Thank you once again, Sridhar.
Thank you.
Audience here at
Yes,
10 o'clock, we have a treat of not just one, but three sessions to choose from. You have a masterclass, you have a panel discussion, and you have a power talk. So I don't know how you're going to choose, but all I can tell you is the recordings will be available. And Sridhar, we will take you on that next conclave will possibly be on the Zoho platform, and we will meet again.
thank you.
Thank you, Sridhar. Thank you, thank you, thank you once again.